Depression. Depression isn't sadness. Sadness is a response to something. You lose someone. You fail at something. You grieve. And eventually, it passes. Depression is what happens when that darkness arrives with no clear reason and refuses to leave. The hippocampus, which handles memory and emotional context, actually shrinks under the weight of chronic stress. Elevated cortisol, the body's stress hormone, is toxic to those neurons over time. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making and clear thinking, becomes underactive. That's where the mental fog comes from, the feeling that even simple choices become exhausting. Meanwhile, the amygdala, which is the part of your brain that detects danger, becomes overactive. It starts responding to neutral situations as if they're threats. So your brain is simultaneously too slow to think clearly and too fast to react to things that aren't actually dangerous. Neurotransmitters also play a role, such as serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. The chemicals your brain uses to regulate mood and motivation, as well as energy, become disrupted. This is why depression doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects how you sleep, how you eat, whether you can concentrate, whether you can even get out of bed. What makes depression dangerous is that it convinces you that the way you feel is the truth, that you've always been this way, that nothing will help. But depression is a liar. It's a physiological state, not a permanent reality. Generalized anxiety disorder. Generalized anxiety disorder turns normal worry into a constant alarm system that never shuts off. Your brain's threat detection system gets stuck in the on position. The prefrontal cortex, which should be able to override false alarms, can't shut it down. So your body stays locked in survival mode even when nothing is wrong. When that happens, your body floods with cortisol. Your heart spikes, your muscles lock, your digestion shuts down. Your body is preparing to survive a life-threatening situation, except there's no bear. It's just an email you haven't replied to. And the worry never stops. Your health, your money, that thing you said 3 years ago. An endless loop with no off switch. People tell you to just calm down, but you can't reason with a brain that's physically wired to panic. Over time, you avoid everything that triggers worry. Parties, phone calls, new people. Your world shrinks until even your own room doesn't feel safe. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, ADHD, is often misunderstood. Starting with its name, it's not an attention deficit. It's an attention regulation crisis caused by a starving brain. Deep inside your head sits the prefrontal cortex. It's responsible for planning and controlling impulses, telling your body to start a task. But to do its job, the prefrontal cortex needs fuel. That fuel is dopamine, the chemical messenger responsible for motivation and reward. In a neurotypical brain, doing a simple, boring chore releases a steady drip of dopamine. You get a chemical reward just for doing what you need to do. But an ADHD brain is wired to clear out dopamine too quickly because the fuel tank is always empty. So when you look at a boring assignment or a pile of laundry, your prefrontal cortex has zero fuel to start the engine. You can stare at the task, screaming at yourself in your head to just get up and do it, but your body physically refuses to move. People call it laziness. But it's actually neurological paralysis, a condition called executive dysfunction. Because your brain is starving, it constantly goes hunting for short-term pleasures. That's why you doom scroll on your phone or crave sugar. You aren't easily distracted. Your nervous system is desperately searching for the chemical stimulation it needs just to reach a normal baseline. And when it finally finds something that delivers a massive rush of dopamine, the system locks on. This is known as hyperfocus. You might research a random topic or play a new game for 12 hours straight, completely blind to time, thirst, and hunger. ADHD isn't a behavior problem. It's a brain with an empty fuel tank that exhausts itself every single day just to navigate a world built for people with full tanks. Post-traumatic stress disorder. When you experience something deeply traumatic, your brain's alarm system, the fight, flight, or freeze response, activates. A network called the HPA axis floods your body with stress hormones like cortisol. Your heart races, your breathing quickens, your muscles lock. Your body does exactly what it needs to do to keep you alive. In a healthy brain, the alarm turns off once the danger is gone. The hormone levels stabilize, but in a brain with PTSD, the alarm system breaks. The threat is over, but the physiological siren never stops screaming. This creates a terrifying sensitivity to triggers. Because your brain never properly filed the trauma as in the past, everyday sensations become incredibly dangerous. The smell of smoke, a slamming door, a specific tone of voice, these don't just remind you of the trauma. Your brain chemically reacts as if the trauma is happening again, right in this exact second. Your body executes the exact same neurochemical survival cascade it did on the worst day of your life, while you are just standing in a grocery store. Because these triggers are everywhere and completely unpredictable, your primary goal becomes avoidance. You stop going out. You isolate yourself from friends. It feels like a pause button has been violently slammed on your life, locking you in place while the rest of the world just keeps moving forward. Bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder is a condition where your brain loses the ability to keep your mood stable. The core problem is damage in the frontolimbic network, the connection between your prefrontal cortex and your limbic system, the emotional center of your brain. When this circuit malfunctions, your brain swings between extreme states it can't regulate. Most people think bipolar disorder is one condition. It's actually two distinct conditions. In bipolar 2, you get short bursts of hypomania, spiked energy, sharp focus, high productivity. It can actually feel good, but the crash is where bipolar 2 does its real damage. You spend most of your time in severe depression where getting out of bed feels impossible. Bipolar 1, on the other hand, is defined by full-blown mania. Dopamine surges so high you feel invincible. You sleep 2 hours, spend money you don't have, start 5 projects at once. In severe cases, mania tips into psychosis, delusions, and paranoia where reality stops making sense. Then the depressive crash hits and all that energy vanishes completely. Every untreated episode reshapes the brain, making future episodes more likely and harder to stabilize. Schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a disorder where your brain loses the ability to tell what's real. The leading explanation involves dopamine, too much of it firing in a pathway called the mesolimbic pathway, which connects your midbrain to your emotional center. This overactivity is what creates the hallucinations and delusions. But there's a second layer. Your prefrontal cortex actually loses gray matter volume. Your neurons are still there. They just can't communicate properly. These are called positive symptoms. Not positive as in good, but as in something being added. You might hear voices that comment on everything you do, criticize you, or tell you to do things. You might become convinced that people are following you, or that you're receiving secret messages meant only for you. This isn't imagination or a choice. Your brain is generating these experiences with the same certainty it generates the chair you're sitting on right now. Then there are negative symptoms. Things being taken away. Your emotions go flat. You stop being able to feel pleasure or express what's going on inside. Motivation drains until getting dressed or eating a meal feels like an impossible task. You might stop speaking because organizing your thoughts into sentences takes more energy than you have. This is the side of schizophrenia nobody talks about, and it's often what causes the most damage to someone's daily life. Here's what matters most. People with schizophrenia are far more likely to be victims of violence than to be the ones causing it. The vast majority never hurt anyone. But the stigma is so powerful that many avoid seeking help entirely. Schizophrenia isn't a monster. It's a medical condition that requires treatment and support. Obsessive-compulsory disorder. Obsessive-compulsory disorder is caused by a malfunction in a feedback loop that connects 3 parts of your brain: your prefrontal cortex, your basal ganglia, and your thalamus. Normally, this loop helps you perform an action, register that it's done, and move on. You lock the door, brain confirms it, you walk away. In OCD, that confirmation signal never arrives. The loop gets stuck, so you check the door again, and your brain keeps screaming that something is still wrong. The chemistry behind it involves 2 key players. Serotonin, which helps regulate mood and anxiety, appears to be underactive in OCD, which is why serotonin-boosting medications are the first line of treatment. But here's what's newer. Researchers have found that glutamate, the brain's main excitatory chemical, is elevated in the areas that drive OCD. It essentially keeps the alarm blaring when there's no fire, and that imbalance may be the core of why the loop can't shut off. The disorder has 2 sides. Obsessions are intrusive thoughts you can't control. They're unwanted images or urges that crash into your mind against your will. Fear that you'll hurt someone you love. Convinced that you left the stove on and your house will burn down. Disturbing thoughts that go against everything you believe. Even if you want these thoughts to go away, they loop over and over again. Compulsions are the rituals your brain invents to temporarily relieve that fear. Wash your hands until they bleed, check the lock 20 times, count every step in multiples of 4, tap your shoulder in a specific pattern, and the cruel part is, that moment of relief is what reinforces the behavior. OCD is basically a brain stuck in a loop it can't escape. Narcissistic personality disorder. Narcissism exists on a spectrum. Everyone has some level of it. Wanting attention, feeling special, needing recognition, that's normal. NPD is what happens when that self-image inflates so far that it takes over someone's entire life and damages everyone around them. There are 2 forms. Grandiose narcissism is the loud version. Extroverted, dominant, attention-seeking. These are the people who chase power and status not to accomplish something, but because they need to be seen. Vulnerable narcissism is quieter, but just as destructive. These individuals feel deeply entitled but are hypersensitive to criticism. A minor slight can trigger resentment that lasts for weeks. At the brain level, people with NPD show structural differences in areas tied to empathy. MRI studies found that individuals with NPD have less gray matter in the anterior insula and parts of the prefrontal cortex, the exact regions your brain uses to feel empathy. They can understand another person's perspective cognitively, but they can't actually feel it. That's the core deficit. The cognitive machinery for empathy is partially intact. The emotional wiring is not. What makes NPD self-reinforcing is that when their inflated self-image gets challenged even slightly, the brain's anterior cingulate cortex overreacts to the perceived rejection. That triggers defensive aggression, manipulation, or withdrawal. NPD isn't confidence or self-love. It's a disorder where the self-image is so fragile that the entire personality is built to protect it at the cost of everyone else. Borderline personality disorder. BPD is fundamentally a disorder of emotional regulation. The emotions you feel aren't different from anyone else's. They're just far more intense, reactive, and far harder to bring back down. Neuroimaging studies show a consistent pattern. Emotional signals are amplified, and the brain's ability to regulate them is weakened. Reactions fire harder and faster than they should, especially to social rejection, and the system that's supposed to bring those reactions back down doesn't have enough power to do it. The difference between BPD, bipolar disorder, and narcissistic personality disorder comes down to what's going wrong and where. In NPD, the brain's empathy regions are structurally underdeveloped. It doesn't feel enough. In bipolar disorder, mood episodes are marked by mania, lasting days or weeks, and cycle independently of external triggers. In BPD, the emotional system is structurally intact but overactive. It feels too much. And the shifts are rapid, reactive, and almost always triggered by interpersonal events. This is why a perceived slight from a friend can trigger a swing from deep affection to intense anger to crushing emptiness, all before the day is over. The fear of abandonment is extreme. It can drive frantic efforts to keep people close, constant reassurance seeking, emotional outbursts, even threats of self-harm. But those same behaviors push people away, which confirms the fear, and that intensifies the cycle. Autism spectrum disorder. Every brain processes the world differently, but in autism, those differences are fundamental, affecting how you take in sensory information, how you communicate, and how you navigate social environments. In autism, nearby brain cells communicate intensely with each other. This can produce sharp focus, strong pattern recognition, and deep attention to detail. But the connections between distant brain regions are weaker, especially the pathways your brain uses to read emotions, process social cues, and adapt to changing situations. This is why sensory input hits differently. Sounds that others ignore can be overwhelming. Textures that most people don't notice can feel unbearable. The brain is receiving the same information, it's processing it at a different intensity. Some signals get amplified, others get muted, and reading facial expressions and body language doesn't come automatically. It's not a lack of empathy or indifference. The neural pathways that make social interpretation instinctive in most brains require conscious effort. You can learn it, but it doesn't come free. This is also why routine matters. When your brain is already working overtime just to process sounds and faces and social rules, predictability is a relief. Unexpected changes are overwhelming. Routine is just how you keep a loud world manageable.